Hello, hello. It's Wednesday where we talk to Ricky Williams about just about everything cultural and astrology. Today is a very special episode because one of our best friends at the Moira Press, Casey Cardoso, is also here. It turns out that Ricky has read Casey's book, which I didn't know that was going to happen. So Casey, why don't you introduce yourself to us? Who are you? What's your deal?
Yeah, I'm Casey Cardoso. I'm co-author of Astro-Somatica with Andy over there, and we just wanted to do a thing, and so we did a thing. Um, she actually introduced me to medical astrology about 15 years ago, and I was like so enthralled by it that I just wanted to know more. And she was like, "It doesn't exist." So I just opened up the research books and did what I could, and I was like, "Well, then we need to do the next chapter," and that's what Astro-Somatica became. So I do body
Right, but
work
medical
and
astrology exists, but you took us more to another level of like dermatome astrology, and you're a kinesiologist. So that's what you're talking about didn't exist is the kind of dermatome layer, right?
yeah. So my background is in body work and massage therapy, and then I took advanced exercise physiology classes and kinesiology, and it just like opened the body in a different way to me. And when we were layering this stuff on, I was like, well, they keep talking about like this sign is the ruler of this organ, and just scientifically, they call that the end organ factor. So you can map it all the way back to the spine. And I was like, well, what if we treated the spine and follow the dermatomes and see if we get some different results for people? And we did start getting different results for people. So it was just really fun.
Wait, Ricky, do you know what a dermatome is?
Yeah. I've done some body work training, so at least I know the basics. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons I brought Casey on was to be your bodywork comrade because you're both Virgo risings. Um, so Casey's a Virgo sun, Virgo rising. That's a lot of Virgo, very physical, very tactile. And but then Casey has a Jupiter and Pisces square Neptune, which is on the node. So also very spiritual and kind of does that like mind body, Do you feel like your Virgo rising contributes to your body work background, Ricky?
I do. I do.
Yeah. But now
Definitely definitely contributes to it. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, well, Casey, how long have you been studying astrology?
When did we meet? Like in 2003?
Like 20 years ago. Yeah, we used to do
Yeah.
psychic seances in the garage like
Hmm.
20 years ago. Um, okay, so about 20 years. And now do you actually do astrology readings for your massage therapy clients? Like how often do you actually mix the two, astrology and body work?
I do. I get some referrals in from just, the astrology community that they're like, I heard you know how to incorporate charts into work, and like what does that look like? So those are super fun. If I'm working with a client that comes in for something medically related, somewhere by the third or fourth visit, I'll bring up astrology, and then they get real interested. And I have the chart on the wall, which I'm always kind of glancing at and being like, okay, what dermatome am I following? And then because it's color coded, I'm kind of like, okay, so that's the sign related. And then I'll be like, get curious and ask them further astro data, and then pull their chart up, and then it's just opens up a new cool conversation with people.
Okay. We got that background out of the way. So you're probably wondering why I brought Casey on, Ricky. Well, I was thinking we've never talked about the physical layer of, medical astrology or any physical astrology and like cultural factors. And I know that you do massage and body work yourself, Ricky. So I thought this would be a way to kind of look at your body work side of the equation as well, because you're very multifaceted. You write an app, you do body work. Like it's like, how do you find the time? Just kidding, you're famous. You've got all kinds of time.
Hmm.
Anyway, so let's see. Okay, let's talk about this. Now, in body work for both of you, is there a cultural layer to that work? And what would you say it is? All right. Do you ever have to tell Casey, tell the story about the person you were telling me about, the Asian lady.
Yeah. Um, Well, we part of our continuing ed within the last decade or so, there's a cultural competency perspective that we have to take to be sensitive to what people may be experiencing, based on their cultural upbringing. And so there was before we actually started taking those courses, I didn't know this, but I was like, this lady had some neck and some shoulder pain, and I was just working on her, and I was working on the front of her shoulder like this. And it was before I had people stay clothed. Now that's how I work on them now. But I had the draping on, and it was all like properly. But I was like working the top of her shoulder up here. And afterward, she didn't say anything to me at the time, but later on, the doctor who I was working for came up to me and was like, wow, did I hear an earful about how you tried to grope that patient? And I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, yeah, she thought you were all trying to get up in her breasts and like get in there. And I was like, but she said she had some shoulder pain. So I was working on her shoulder. So like, I mean, I kind of had a harsh lesson on that level to being like, oh, in different cultures in different places, like they kind of tell you when you travel, like how to be when you go somewhere. So why wouldn't that be the same coming in this way? And those cultural competencies classes have really highlighted the fact that like not everybody addresses things the way that we do. And so you should ask if you're recognizing that somebody looks like they're from a different culture, how would they like to be treated with their body? And then, try to work with it and then respect those issues.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What came to my mind was that I think different cultures have a different relationship to body work. Uh, One of the things I noticed, for instance, in Asian culture, that and I'm generalizing, of course, but if the time I spent in Asia, there's a massage place like 7-Eleven, like every block. So, and studying Chinese medicine a little bit, and a lot of it is touch, body work, working with the meridians, working with the body. So I think different cultures have different perspectives with body work. Another example is I grew up, as we know, going to church, very religious family. I grew up in a very religious family, and we had something called laying on the hands, laying on of hands. And people, you'd go up to the front, and the ministers or the preachers would put their hands on a certain part of your body, and they would pray over it. They'd pray over that part of the body.
Mm.
Um, if I to an average white person, and I walk up to them, and we're talking about body work, and they get on the table, and I put my hands on them, and I start praying, they're gonna look at me like, what the heck is he doing? Or even, most of my body work is cranial sacral, manual manipulation, kind of soft touch, working with the fascia a lot. And some people, when they come in and they've never experienced that type of body work, they might say, "You're not doing anything," or "What are you doing?" It's different. So that, to me, that's where the cultural layer comes in. Is that different cultures have different relationships with body work, but also different relationships with the body, and also I think different conceptions of the body mind and where they cross over. Mainly American white culture, allopathic medicine. It's like something going on with the body. It's like, give me some Advil.
Yeah. Take a pill, even if it's in your tiny little toe. Like, how's the pill gonna get down to your toe? But whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, now that's what I'm talking about. Now you guys are making me nervous there for a second. So no, Ricky, you make a really good point. Like, it makes me think of when in Portland, when I drive down 82nd, which is like the kind of like trashy part of town or whatever, there's like 15,000 Asian foot massage parlors. And like, what is, I mean, I'm not trying to like make a commentary on like that's trashy, but it's just like there's this kind of cultural thing of like there's foot massage on the outskirts of town, and but I bet those practitioners are actually just epic, like that they'll get on your foot and just like heal your spleen or something like that. I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly. Yeah. I had an experience. I was traveling through Australia and got bit by something. My foot swelled up. And I remember I was in Sydney and I went to one of these foot massage places. And this woman spent like 3 hours. I mean, I kept paying her. She spent 3 hours and she brought out a bunch of tools and she went to work on my feet. It was it
interesting.
was it was amazing. It
Yeah,
was
like I feel
amazing.
like those places need more respect, but it's like maybe they maybe it's just certain pockets maybe I'm being stereotyping, and that was a kind of wild error on my part. But you know what I'm talking about? Like I feel like maybe it's the certain cultural pockets of town that because I feel like as a white person, I'm not super privy to those places. Like I can't just go into like my inner city mall and get one of these authentic ethnic, healing things. It's like it seems like it's kind of out of touch,
It can be, I think, but I think that's the cultural layer. I think maybe for me it was easier because I traveled or because I got into the culture of body work. But anywhere I travel, I want to experience the body work from that
Mhm.
from that place. I don't know because a lot of times, especially in other countries, it's not like they're talking to you and telling you what they're doing. But just from my studying, I'm always wondering, do they understand the philosophy behind what they're doing? Right? Are they are they applying it? Are they treating my body the same way they treat everyone else's body?
Mhm. Mhm.
It's making me think about, okay, there's all this medical astrology mumbo jumbo in astrology, which is amazing, but I've never heard anyone talk about like culturalism and medical astrology. It seems like a very Eurocentric model of medical astrology. Like I don't really know of any kind of, but I'm not like super in the know, about if there, but Chinese medicine, like how much does that overlay with medical astrology?
So it depends. It depends. I think in Western, Ayurvedic, and Chinese medicine, there's in all three systems, there's definitely a distinctive overlap between astrology and medicine in all three systems. But typically, you have to go to the more traditional physicians in order to find the ones that are still practicing using astrology in their practice. I know, like when I studied Ayurveda, and the top level teachers, they all looked at your Jyotish, your astrology, to get a sense of, for instance, elemental breakdown or the humors, and at the core of most traditional forms of medicine or treatment is constitution. Is they say we're not treating a disease, we're treating a person, and certain diseases manifest from certain constitutions. And so it was used to get a sense of, okay, who's here, right? Because someone can have a headache, right? But is the headache coming because this person has, five planets in Aries? They're always kind of they're always
Oh,
their heads on fire, or is it coming because Saturn is opposing the moon and it's creating some kind of constraint?
oh my God, I can't believe I didn't think of Ayurveda. Like, duh, like that is integral. That's more Indian culture, right?
Mhm.
It is, but when you say Indian culture, at the backbone of Indian culture, from my understanding, are the yogic sciences,
Oh.
and Ayurveda, Jyotish, both are part of the yogic sciences.
Interesting, because Ayurveda is definitely like what I like, as a white person, what I say to my students is I'll be like, handle your humors, or whatever. Like if you're hot under the collar, you need to cool down or whatever. But like
Yeah,
Ayurveda literally is like, you need to handle your humors. Like they're like literally scientific about that
yeah,
stuff. And
yeah. That's how I think it should astrology should be applied. Um, Medical astrology should be applied. The same kind of way of understanding, what signs or what planets are powerful in this chart, because what you're going to see is when disease manifests, it tends to manifest through the most powerful symbols in the chart.
Right.
so Casey, do you look at humors or the blood types or the elements in a chart?
Yeah, I tend to notice that a lot in like the types of tissue that I'm ending up working on, like water elements. They're a little bit more squishy and kind of squishy.
You
They
can
just
say
feel like
that
they're
here.
Yeah,
they
I'll
like
show you squishy.
they
Right.
like tissue that's filled with water. And then earth bodies tend to be a little bit more stocky and dense, and so you can definitely see the elements filter through.
yeah.
um I think what you were saying kind of reminded me of my time when I was in Thailand, and just kind of understanding culturally how they apply the philosophy. Like you're getting Americans who are at different later stages in life, and they're coming to try these new types of medicines, and they're like, oh, they overstretched me or they did this. And while I was there, I became aware that like they these practices get introduced so early that probably by the time they're my age and getting Thai massages, like their body's used to being manipulated in that way and can receive that medicine. In addition, body work is the foundation to Thai medicine. So you have to become a body worker and touch bodies before you learn the rest of like how it works and what it does. And here I was given a point really early in my career, and I think that's partially why I've stuck with bodywork for so long. And he mentioned do what no other doctor does and get your hands on living tissue. Learn what healthy tissue feels like, tissue with disease and illness or injured tissue. And you start to really be able to palpate the differences. And then as you just gain something with experience, you're able to help people quicker and faster move through. So you apply that on top of the layer of, or add to that the layer of medical astrology. Now you have a map and you get to just strip out adhesions and scar tissue, whether it's in muscles or nerves or motion, all of it can be addressed.
Yeah, it's like teaching your hands astrology.
Yeah.
The idea, and the first time I think I ran into the idea was in your book, and I started applying it, and it's magical, right? It's just thinking of someone has Saturn and yeah, I'll do mine. Saturn and Leo, and Leo rules the heart and the spine, and this idea of like touching someone's spine, their back, the Leo areas, and if Saturn is strong there, right, starting to feel what Saturn feels like, and then you go to someone who has Saturn and Capricorn, and you put your hands on their knees and you listen, see if you can feel a similar feeling of Saturn in the knees, and you can go to each part of the body and feel the planetary energies in those areas of the body.
Makes me think of it in different cultures. Like, let's say you had a knee problem, right? Like, in how that would be received in different cultures. Like it maybe in some very hardworking cultures, they would say like, like toughen up and get to work, or, and maybe in some more lackadaisical cultures, they would say like lay down and rest. And I think what happens in the body really is filtered through the culture that we're like living in, like how the culture receives illness or health or kind of thing. So any thoughts on that?
I have two thoughts. One, studying Chinese medicine, there's so much talk about longevity, and when they say longevity, they don't mean living a long time. They mean staying vital for a long time, right? They said we all die, but none of us have to perish.
Mm.
And so to me, I really have fallen in love with that perspective, because what I've gotten from my studies in Chinese medicine is there's always something that you can do. Is that even dis-ease or disease is something to be worked with,
Hmm.
Where in African American culture, at least the one that I grew up in, disease is seen as like punishment from God. So it's like people in the church, at least the church I grew up in, are less likely to get diagnosed or share cancer because it means they're being punished by God, and it means that they're not living right. So I think you're right, as the relationship to the body is directly connected to the culture and is directly connected to how we take care of, how we view, how we treat the body.
It makes me think of some cultures where they interpret deafness as being a curse from God, so like the kids will come out being deaf and then the whole family is shunned culturally because of this deaf child. And and then there's like the medicalization of deafness in America, where then it went through the cochlear implant, and we can even look at the outer planets and how they affect the relationship of culture with the body. For example, that Pluto, Uranus, and Virgo generation, they medicalized everything. Are you transgender? Get a surgery. Are you deaf? Get a cochlear implant. Like everything became this medicalization of anything different. It almost turned the body medical. Whereas, a lot of deaf people would say, well, this deafness is a cultural thing. It's not a medical thing. And so, I guess even the level of how much we medicalize certain things is cultural.
How would you how would you bring astrology into understanding deafness from a body medical astrology perspective?
Well, I think we have to look at those four layers, right? You can have genetic deafness, so that's a genetic layer. So it can come down genetically. It could be cultural or climate, like you could, I guess, I don't know, you could have something like really loud bust your eardrum in your welding shop, and that can make you deaf. But from the chart layer, I've seen, deafness come in like Saturn and Taurus, weird things where the tubules of the ear is shut. But you can't always see the deafness in the chart. But sometimes I think how people receive their deafness is a lot of the chart layer, right? For example, some deaf people feel really blocked communicatively, and they might have a Mercury Saturn conjunction in the chart. And so they keep trying to communicate, in whatever way they can, but they're kind of blocked in that communication. And then we have some deaf people who are Mercury Jupiter conjunctions, and they're linguistically awesome. And, so I think I've looked at all of those things, but I mean, of course, each case of deafness is going to be a different case of why and how it's received and how that person lives with their deafness.
Yeah, I mean, I have this fantasy of doing this kind of research of collecting, let's say, 500 charts for different conditions and just seeing what we can learn from an astrological perspective. Like, so I would collect the condition, the area of the body, and the date of diagnosis or first noticing symptoms. And I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
That reminds me of that time we were at the book fair and we were having people come up and I had the massage chair and we were being like, can we identify just based on the feel, something that you said earlier, Ricky, about how does it feel, the tissue feel? And then I would make a guesstimation on the body and Andy would then be like, do their chart and being like, look, and it's so like it can be palpable once you learn to recognize what you're feeling for. I
Yeah.
think
I
that
mean,
that would
like
be a
you would
great
feel it
research
and say
project.
like I think their Saturn's in Gemini from what I feel in the spine, and then we would go look in the chart and do research that way.
You know, yeah. I mean, just with the having a 4-year-old in the house, and with kids, illness, this stuff, it comes really intensely, and then it tends to leave. But you get really good examples. And my son, he's really sensitive to aspects affecting the first house. You know, and Mars is his strongest planet in the seventh house, opposing Pluto in the first. So like, several months ago, we woke up in the morning and he kept like, they could tell his penis was inflamed and he kept like grabbing it and it was really uncomfortable. And so looked in the chart and like Mars was in Scorpio, making an aspect to his natal Mars. And and so typically I might freak out, his penis is inflamed, what do we do? But I looked at the chart and I saw, okay, I have an astrological understanding of this. Now what? And so so I treated it like a Mars issue. And so there's this cool song by Janae Aiko called Triggered Mantra. It's kind of like a Mars antidote. So I just got him really comfortable. I think I gave him like 2 milligrams of edible. And I just put this mantra on and I laid him on the couch and rubbed his back until he fell asleep. And he woke up 4 hours later and everything was like, he was good.
Interesting. Well, okay.
So I think, so what I'm saying is I think if we keep it on the astrological level, we can come up with novel ideas of how to treat something.
Mm-hmm. Oh, 100%. Like you could have bloodlet him or something. No, I don't know. That's
Well,
pretty
that's
controversial.
old. Yeah, exactly.
No, I've had a case of an adult bleeding penis. That was a Sun, Mars, and Leo, and had to transit to it, and that's just so much energy going right down the spinal column, and it was just bleeding out the end of the penis, like
Yeah.
crazy. And I would have done bloodletting for that. I would have pulled blood out the back, and so but the body was bloodletting itself. So I was like,
Yeah.
the body's its own doctor in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Here's an example. So of
We're
how
we're,
I
ta-
got.
we're Geminis, so you're gonna have to talk over us, Casey. Sorry.
Oh yeah, sorry about that. I was driving in the car the last week, and I made a really powerful batch of ginger tea, and I was in a hurry to get to the airport. So I was looking for something to put it in, and I just grabbed like one of those Yetis. So I grabbed the Yeti and I poured my tea in, and I started driving, and it's an hour drive to the airport. So I started thinking, if I just take the top off the Yeti, by the time I'm halfway the trip, the tea will be ready to drink. So I like put it next to me, took the top off. And then halfway through the trip, we have to get on the freeway, and it's like a sharp turn. So I get on the freeway for the sharp turn, and I guess I knock over the ginger tea, which hadn't cooled at all in half an hour, and it like spilled on my lap. Okay? And so I'm driving in the car, and I'm like, "Oh, make it stop! Make it stop!" My thighs are just burning, you know. And so I look, I'm driving, and I didn't realize that hot water could burn the skin off. You know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I have these second degree burns, and I'm sitting in the airport thinking, okay, do I need to do something about this, or am I okay to go on my trip? And then, of course, I get on the plane, and I'm like, first thing I want to know is like, what's going on in the chart? What's going on in the chart? And I learned something. So the obvious place, at least for me to look, was what's going on in my third house. Because I was driving when it happened, and the transiting sun was in the ninth house in Gemini, opposing my Neptune in the third house. And typically, if I'm thinking about burning myself, I typically think about Mars. Right? But Mars wasn't doing anything. And I looked at the sun, and the words that came to my mind was sunburn, and that Mars can burn, but what I learned in this instance is the sun can burn too. But we don't typically talk about the sun. We do in everyday talk. Someone's in the sun too long, they're going to burn. Not me, but most people, white people, they're going to burn. But for some reason, that doesn't carry over into astrology, and we typically only think about Mars. But from that experience, and I would even guess, and who knows, but I would even guess if I did some research and I studied ginger, that ginger might be ruled by the sun. I think part of the burn was it was a really strong batch of ginger tea.
I would be thinking about that more of like that's a cultural layer, like it's something in your environment burned you, not the chart burning you. But I of course would look at
But even the environment, though, what I would say is the environment serves the chart.
Okay. Right, can I say something professorial?
Please.
Okay, so I want to go back to your whole idea of counting up like conditions like deafness and then looking at 500 charts and depression and looking at 500 charts. And like this is historically how astrology's been researched. And I just want to say that's like kind of quantitative analysis of like, can we count up depressive charts and find similarities? I would make the case that because astrology is a study of individuality, a not more interesting research study, but something that might work better for the astrology, tool would be to study a chart longitudinally. Like, so we take a depressed chart, figure out what aspect of the chart is creating depression, and then watch that longitudinally. Or we could take, 20 people with deafness, look at their chart, figure out kind of how their communication is affected. When do they feel frustrated communicatively, and then watch that longitudinally. I just want to add that into our repertoire of how we research astrology, because I think counting up and looking for similarities in a study that's actually the path of individuality, I mean, it just seems counterintuitive to me as a researcher.
Well, and that brings up the idea of like how you're tracking cycles, because we all have a pattern that we're following, and the transits are illuminating what that pattern is.
Yeah, 100%. So I agree with you, Andy. And I'd say that they're not mutually exclusive. I think the kind of research I'm talking about sets us up and prepares us to do the kind of research you're talking about. Because for me, what I'm looking for are constants. An example, and to build on what I was saying earlier, I sometimes look at the planets as magnets, but they're magnets of certain energy. So if someone is going through a powerful Mars activation, and there's certain things we would say ruled by Mars, sharp objects, etc., but also people, right? Marsy type people. And what I find when you're going through a Mars time, you just are more powerfully attractive to the Mars that lives in your environment. Because again, like I think planets manifest in several ways in the way I think about it. I think the first and most subtle way is someone starts to sense, right? You might wake up in the morning and feel like I'm a little on edge today, you know? And depending on someone's history, they might say, I need to go for a walk. I need to go to the gym, you know, because they sense that Mars is activated. And they're thinking of ways to remediate or ways to express the Mars in healthy ways. But some people have been trained not to be sensitive to Mars, and so they might not recognize that they're a little bit on edge. Okay, the people around them will recognize it, and I think that's the second way it comes out: is we're not aware of what's going on, but we act it out. So again, I'm not aware I'm on edge, but my wife is like, "Are you being a jerk today?" You know, and then I have the ability to be aware. Okay, and I think the third level is no one in my environment is aware. And so I attract it in life as an experience. And this is where it gets interesting, because if we don't sense it on the more nuanced levels, that's when we invite these kinds of manifestations to show up in our life. And why did that happen to me? And then you can look at the chart and say, oh, so I keep it very general when I say a disease connected to a astrological configuration. It's more about understanding where do things come from, you know, and so I call them constants, right? To see that in 75% of the cases of blah, 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 right? We see this is present. And the other part of my research where it's not it's not tracking it over time necessarily, but it is saying marking the date of when you first noticed the symptom and mark the date when you got the diagnosis and look at the chart to see what transits and progressions were being acted. And I think the two are very much related. We look at a natal chart. The natal chart is showing us what are the predispositions to certain ailments in this person's chart.
Yeah, like you could say that it's a genetic predisposition because a chart is genetic. It's your genesis, right? So it's like we might say this person has a genetic predisposition to migraines or whatever it is. Okay, well, let me take back the show for 1 second to say I want to ask you guys a case study. Okay, let's say we had a case of somebody with digestive disturbance, and you saw in the natal chart there was a Mars in Virgo conjunct Saturn in Virgo. Okay, so how would you treat that case differently or similarly if the person was maybe an African American teenage boy or an old Asian man or I don't know, a Thai person? Like, how would you treat the case differently or similarly? Remember Mars, Saturn, and Virgo, digestive disturbance. Okay, Casey, you go first.
Well, I feel like one of the universal equalizers, and to kind of just like take race out of it, is that we're all these same organic beings physiologically. So I would first address it from, I'm looking at you as a human body and it operates in this order of and sequences. And so let's address this from that astrological point of view. And then now through the training, having cultural competencies, what do I need to be aware of if it's a young African American or an elderly Asian man? I think that it would be like how I would address the process and look at it real physical first, and then take the overlay of other considerations that I would need to work within.
Okay, Ricky?
Yeah, for me, not everyone that has Saturn, Mars, and Virgo is going to manifest digestive issues.
But that's our case. We have a case.
Yeah, you cut me off before I said what I was going to say next.
No,
no, you're good. You're good. So what I'm saying is, because of that, then I would make the assumption that something in their environment. That it's something in their environment, and because the way my teacher says, if a disease is showing up or something is showing up like that, it's evidence of a. I have to be careful with this. It sometimes can be evidence of a poor response to something, and because I think of harmony and discord, and disease is a manifestation of discord, and sometimes it's not personal. It's just the way our culture view something is just so fucked up. Anytime you engage in it, you can't help but get sick, right? So there's cultural diseases that just by being born into that culture, and we see this in the demographic data, right? Certain ethnicities are more prone to certain kinds of illnesses. That's cultural, in my perspective. There's probably going to be some genetic stuff, but it's cultural, and I think culture does come through the chart. Okay, so for me, I would at a root level, I would understand based on their culture that Mars Saturn, it's going to manifest differently, and I would try to understand why is it manifesting in such a way that it's creating this kind of physically manifested discord. An example that's coming to mind is I have a good friend of mine, the one I tried to get to come on the podcast last week, and she's born. Both of her parents were born in Japan, right? So raised by Japanese parents, but in America, her whole life in America, and she's got like 3 planets in Scorpio. Mars, Venus conjunct in Scorpio, conjunct the sun. Conjunct the sun. It's like, whoa. And she's got Saturn in the 4th. So like the Japanese influence, powerful, because I think if I had to pick a planet for Japanese culture, Saturn would be the top 2. So someone born Japanese parents who has Saturn in the 4th, you're going to see Saturn in that person through the culture, in my opinion. Okay. And so based on this, like her access to the her access to the Mars Scorpio stuff, it's not really conscious. And so the Scorpio diseases that are showing up in her life are showing up in her husband. So to me, culture has a whole lot to do, because it gives us a sense of what does culture make allowed to easily express in the person's life, and what does culture suppress. And typically, if something is manifesting as dis-ease, we can assume that it's not conscious, that it's an unconscious expression or manifestation of something.
Am I allowed to talk now?
Yeah, you are. But it wasn't you weren't allowed to talk. You just weren't allowed to cut me off when I was saying what you said I wasn't saying. So, but we're good.
Taking notes on that. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
No, I'm allowed to annoy Ricky. Anyway, so I just want to build on what Ricky's saying. No, I think it's such an astute point, because I think culturally, like, there's a lot that goes into, especially like food. It makes me think of food, like what a person's eating. Like a teenage boy might be eating a lot of chips and junk food, whereas an older Asian man might be eating like miso broth and bone broth and more rice and congee and things like that. But I mean, we have to like look at what are you eating, what's in the culture around you, and as far as like if the kid's on a basketball team and they just eat junk food and they go to McDonald's after school, it's like it's just different than So we have to look at a lot of the culture for me physically is like, what are you eating, what are you ingesting, and then also what would you respond to as far as treatments? Like, if the kid was eating a bunch of junk food and I said, listen, you have a genetic predisposition to inflamed intestines. If you eat this junk food, it's going to hurt you. I don't know if I can get him to really make a behavioral change. That's where actually prescribing a med might actually work better for that teenage boy, because it's like a quick fix for that thing. Whereas maybe the older Asian man, we could get him to change his diet more. I mean, these are the kind of things, that I would consider.
Yeah. So I think culturally, in my culture, part of my culture is football culture, which is like, masculine, tough, whatever. So based on that, my approach, for a young person especially, is I wouldn't try to get them to change their diet. I would do my best to point out what I'm seeing in the chart and how it's manifesting. And I would get them to come to terms with, if you eat this way, right, be comfortable suffering the consequences. Because Mars Saturn, outside of how it's manifesting in the body, to me, that's the lesson. That's right. Because in football, coaches would say we make things hard, so when you get in the games, it's easy. And Mars Saturn has the ability to build grit. So I would put it on the table, like, your body is very sensitive, and just know if you bypass that sensitivity, you will have to suffer. And I would even urge them to take pride in that suffering. Because there's something about, for me, healing comes from changing someone's attitude about something, because that allows more harmony to flow into that configuration. if someone has a lot of hard aspects, but they have a good attitude about them, like you're gonna see, right? The person becomes someone that you respect because they get shit done. Because when things get hard, they don't complain, right? They smile and they get at it.
Yeah. Yeah, that
Get
kind of
it?
reminds me of the place. Well, I tell a lot of people, if you give the body the right environment, it can heal itself. And if you take astrology into it, then I feel like I use the word navigate a lot. Like
Yeah.
the energies that are forthcoming, if you know how that they're coming, then you can do different types of remedies to prevent that. It's like a storm. The captain isn't just going to go straight into the storm. They're going to figure out how to navigate it around correctly. So if you could teach people how to be aware of their environment and these constitutions that are coming up, then they can have different tools in place to navigate through that, which then creates the right environment for their body to adapt or heal or go around whatever issues that are coming up for them.
Yeah. Or go through it, but no, you got to tighten everything, right? You got to make sure all the
Yeah,
windows are shut. You got to put the shutters out there, right? That you're prepared. You're prepared for it.
prepared.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You're making me think of cultures that honor cyclicalism, like pagan culture. I would
Wow.
probably honors the sun and the moon more, and maybe a pagan person might be more inclined to say, "Okay, I'm going to have you cyclically eat bone broth when you have transits to your Mars Saturn because you're going to have an inflamed response during those times. So can we cyclically eat these certain things?" But like in white American culture, if you said you're going to have cyclical health issues, people are like, "Huh?" Everything's the same linearly. Like everything happens the same every day. Like I don't even think we have a concept for cyclical health in American culture.
Not in American culture, but one of the things that drew me to Ayurveda is because we don't really have a sense of cycles in America. I think we're so Uranian, which is electricity, right? It can be day, it can be daytime all the time. It can be summer, spring all the time. We got air conditioning. We can fix all these things. So I think we've lost touch with nature and the
Mhm.
cyclical
Absolutely.
nature. So I started studying Ayurveda, and they started talking about eating for your constitution and eating differently in different seasons. And I was like, that makes sense. I was like, how come no one ever said that to me? But if you're around farmers a lot, I think that they get it, right? They can appreciate it, and that's why in Leela in my app, I put it's like the daily section tracks the moon through all the signs, all the houses, and all the conjunctions it makes. And I think if someone just followed the moon and say one of the days when the moon was in each of the signs, that people just paid a little bit more attention to that area of the body and gave it a little bit more care. And when the sun was conjunct a planet, someone just gave a little bit more care to those systems and those organs. I think that's one way to be cyclical, and it's more preventative because by paying attention to these parts, they don't right they don't fall into the unconscious and manifest disease. And I find so much with astrology, and we've talked about this, Andy, it's like trauma prevention. And I do think that illness is a form of trauma. As you see it with kids. And I think if we are taking better care of ourselves, that physical illness doesn't have to manifest powerfully. One more thing here. In Ayurveda, they talk about like the image they use is a wave, and our body can handle so much, you know, and then the wave can calm down. But if we put too many stressors on the body and the wave breaks the seal, that's when the disease manifests and it requires,
Hmm.
greater resources to do something about it. And it's also in Chinese medicine, they talk about the Wei Qi. It feels very Mars, right? The defensive system that keeps the invaders out. But when we get sick, we get the chills and fever because the pores open, because the Wei Qi isn't guarding the outside, it's gone inside to fight the pathogens.
Oh, Ricky, this is a good topic for Ricky. I like to uncover parts of Ricky because he knows a lot of different stuff. Okay, so like
Super cool.
I don't mean to pivot, but I do want to pivot a little bit to different cultures around body shape, size, and it's like so how there's like the American doctor culture is like everyone should be thin and the BMI is this and that and most health problems are caused by overweightness and all this kind of stuff. And then there's like the fat activist culture that's like, big bodies are beautiful. And I think it's like Samoan culture, like there's big bodies and like there's different cultures that celebrate big bodies, or like sumo wrestlers are a celebration of big bodies, you know? So what do we think about like cultures and big bodies versus small bodies? And, you know, like what Judith would say in the body types is like there's these all these kind of bodies for the different astrological types. You know, we have big bodies astrologically, and I think, you know, some cultures really look at the lanky body or the fit body as like the only good bodies. But so how do cultures understand these different body types?
Yeah. So what comes to my mind on a general level, and this comes from my bodywork training, is structure and function are interrelated. And the big scale is if we think about that the body shape, what if the body shape was connected to the function of what the body was supposed to be doing? That's my starting point. And I think culturally, depending on how close cultures are to that point of view, they're in a position to, I think, to make a strong response to this question. Because I think you can see, and it's tricky now because we live in a melting pot. I think you can see the chart manifesting physically through the body. And this one woman is a good friend of mine, and every time I'm around her, every single time, right? By the end of the day, she has large breasts. By the end of the day, you know, the buttons are open and she has to like tuck herself back in. And the first time I thought, that's interesting. But the second, third, fourth, fifth time, I was like, I think this is a thing, you know? And so I got curious and I looked at her chart, and her strongest planet is Jupiter in Cancer.
Yeah. Yeah,
You know?
she likes the feeling of her shirt being open.
Or just Jupiter in Cancer, right? Part of the body. Jupiter rules the breast, right? Jupiter is there,
Yeah.
and it's in her first house, you know. So I'm sure this is horribly sexist, but it's honest. Okay, maybe it's maybe it's just instinctual, right? It's like when I see big breasts like that, like part of me just wants to like put my head and like take a nap, you know. And I got little ones, and I see like, oh yeah, that's where I get it from. And so,
Are you a boob guy?
um, I have my moon strongest planet in Cancer. So yes, I have an appreciation. I have an appreciation for that area of the body. Yes, for
Well,
that astrological area of the body.
I do agree with you that like function, the body, I love your point about shape and function go together. And I think if we look at that from a teleological perspective of like what is your life path and purpose? If you're a stonemason, you might have a really thick build, like your super Taurus chart, and you're built to lift up stones and carry stones. Like that is shape versus function. If you're really lanky, you're kind of have a highly oxygenized blood. You have the blood humor very strong, and it's like you're built to think basically. So it's like I agree with you, and like a lot of psychics are kind of roly-poly round watery kind of beings, and they're built to feel emotions. And so I agree with that point wholeheartedly.
Yeah,
Yeah, it makes me think of the stuff we put at the beginning of the book when you were kind of introducing this to me about Ptolemy's four influences, right? That there's the genetics, the climate, the culture, and your astrological. And I like it the way that it's the plant, right? So it's like all of those components are gonna nurture different kinds of plants, and they're gonna grow the way that they're supposed to because of where they're coming up. So I think they're all intertwined, and it can't just really be separated into one thing. And I think the to address the component of like doctors just think that I feel like doctors, they really try to just shove everybody into the textbook based on what they think they know. And then rather than, which is what I really like about medical astrology, is that like that's now shaping the box around you and it's taking all points into consideration on what type of body that you have, whether it's a slight or more full bodied. So I think that
Do you guys
astrology gives more space for that.
do you guys give a massage to a big body the same as a small body?
well, I mean, I don't want to say big or small, but there's different qualities of tissue, and there's different quantities of tissue in each body, and I think you have to respond accordingly. I go back to the idea of my friend Gretchen with the big breasts. You know, is there certain things? And my joke, I was kind of joking. There's certain things when you when you feel or you perceive a certain body shape, that it has an effect on you, you know? And I think there's definitely a cultural layer. When I was in Samoa, right? And around Pacific Islanders, and they saw us. This is when I was playing football, so I was really built, you know. And it's like they worshipped me, you know, because of the size of my body. Right? Other places I go, right? They cross the street because when I'm walking because of the size of my body. So, another thing I was going to say to answer your question was, I think part of the story is how the body got that way.
Interesting. Okay,
Because
they're not all created equal. Like,
well, but like for me, right? My like as a again, I got a strong moon in Cancer, and my whole life my weight is fluctuating, you know, like 10, 15 pounds, right? And it's like if I'm going through a Jupiter transit or something's activating my moon, I I will lovingly allow myself to go up 10 to 15 pounds.
hmm.
Part of it is because I realize the cyclical nature of things. And I think this is where the Virgo comes in, is right. Binge and fast, binge and fast, binge and fast. You know, like people say Virgos are neat, but for me, you see a Virgo's desk, they know where things are. That doesn't mean the same. That's not the same thing as neat, right? You know,
Yeah,
so
that's so interesting about the fluctuate. Like I have Jupiter in Cancer at 6, and Jupiter's coming over my Jupiter, and I'm lovingly allowing myself to gain weight right now too. Because when Saturn hit my moon, I got hypnotized for weight loss, and I lost 29 pounds because Saturn moon wanted to lose weight and wanted to constrict. And right now, I do not want to constrict. I want to eat. Like my daughter has her Mars in Cancer, and she's like baking things. I'm not gonna be like, no, I'm not eating your baking. Like,
yeah,
it's like I will be Jupiter in Cancer eating your baking.
yes, that's
And
exactly.
growing large breasts.
Yes, that's the to me that's the beauty of cycles. If you start to like find your own cycles, then you have greater ease because energy needs to express, and if it's expressing unconsciously, it's typically erratic, right? And I think if we can tune into this any kind of cycle, we can allow for a more harmonious expression because it does not about building up, then explode.
Well, it makes me think of the culture of like sumo wrestlers. It's like it might make them sick to actually get too small because in their culture of what they do, that's actually like you're sickly. Like, and so in Christian Science, where we believe in healing the body through the spirit, like it's how we look at somebody that teaches them if they're sick or not. So if their sumo wrestler friends saw them losing weight, they might look at them and be like, "Are you okay?" Which teaches them that they're sick, right? And it's like, so I think the culture that we in allows us to have a big body or a small body, and part of like you're saying, the story of how we got there is did we choose to make a big body for our wrestling career, or did we just accidentally get a big body because we kept eating Fritos like without knowing that would make a big body? Like I think that
Because we didn't realize that we're supposed to be wrestling.
yeah, oh, yeah, like you only ate the Fritos and didn't wrestle.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Interesting. Well, Casey, we got 2 minutes. What do you have any nuggets for us? Because you've been kind of quiet. Casey's got a Mercury Saturn square, so she is kind of quiet at first.
Yeah, you get me on the one-on-one, you can't shut me up.
That's true. Casey reads
Um,
like literally 20 books at a time.
so great. I'm reading a lot about keto right now, trying to understand the differences on how fuels are being utilized in the body. And one of the things I thought was interesting was that, like in American culture, it is like we teach our bodies how to burn sugar efficiently. We don't teach them how to burn fat efficiently. So but that's another topic for another day.
Oh
Um,
wow.
I
Yeah.
think I think that like if people are watching this and they're like, what can we really like sink down into something? I feel like it's that thing that I said earlier. Like everybody is their own unique expression of their chart. We truly are all unique snowflakes. Our start chart makes us that. Natal chart, I like to say things a little off kilter there. So star chart for me, astro data, plug it all in, see what it pulls out. And that is your unique story. And that is what I would want to talk to people about. I don't really care what another person comes up with or what can seem like these different patterns because patterns might not apply to them in the general sense of the way, and that uniqueness, the validation of their experience and their story, like when I'm practicing with people, that's what becomes most important to me. And so I usually end up getting a lot of clients who go to doctors, they tell them this is just the way that it is, you should accept it. We start working, then through getting to know me, I drop the medical astrology, and most people are so interested, especially when you really tie it into Hippocrates and like he's our father of modern medicine, but yet he's quoted saying one who does not know astrology is not a doctor but a fool. Like you can't help but want to research more and find out what that means. And the more I dig into it, the more individual the person stands out to me and who they are. So I love where people come from, and I definitely love all the food that they bring along with it. So let's talk about culture, but then at the end of the day, let's just talk about you, who you are, and what you're bringing to the table, and all of those other things are a contribution to your story.
Yeah, well said.
All right, wonderful. So Casey, people can find you on Facebook at Casey Cardoso, right?
Yeah. And you can now find me at caseycardoso.com. My new website is up. And if you go to the booking site, there is actually a medical astrology consult on there. So you can specifically book it and it'll ask you for your astro data and you just plug it in and then we can have our initial conversation and then, kind of take it from there depending on what your goals and aspirations are.
All right, well, thank you for blessing us with your real life presence so we could talk your ear off.
Yeah, no, I love it. It was great. It was very interesting things. I look forward to doing a little more deep dive on the channel and seeing what you guys have been talking about.
God, we're amazing. Yeah, we're pulling out. I used to pull on my narcissist pants, but now I'm switching to Machiavellian pants.
Oh,
Oh.
Yeah. So get ready for this year. All right, I'll see you all next week.
All right.
cool. It was nice to meet you, Vicky.
Yeah, you too, Casey. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, bye.
Bye.